going to have a little bit more of an organic conversation about kind of the concept of civic engagement in general and the idea of building Black power and what does Black power mean in the context of the white political system. And so, like I said, it's more of an organic conversation. Pillars of the community. This right here where we are meeting right now is called the Community Spot. It's a place that was built with the idea of bringing the community and all of its beauty and its diversity and everybody that we see here, bringing them together and helping to build kind of relationships and knowing one another with the understanding actually of building power, right? Because unless you know one another, unless you're supporting one another, unless you have a community, we really don't think that you can establish anything at all, much less any type of powerful movement or political system. We don't really, in our political education classes, we don't have any particular viewpoint, agenda, or ideology, except for shit is complex, okay? And so when we have these conversations, we're looking for the complexities of it, and we're not here trying to teach what's right or what's wrong. But really, how can we delve into the complexities of issues and the topics that we deal with? The series that we're getting ready, this is actually the first night that we're getting ready to start on, is going to be around the concept of civic engagement in general. As you all know, we have an election coming up in November with a few kind of important choices that people will be making. And so we see this kind of as an opportunity to bring community members together and be able to understand kind of what are the implications to either being involved in that system or deciding not to be involved in that system. How will those play a role on our own personal lives, right? And so the idea kind of civic engagement, let me just ask, so when you hear civic engagement, what do you think about?
Voting, community, voting.
Voting, okay. Community, anybody else?
Protesting.
Protesting. Other people?
Mobilizing the citizens.
Mobilizing citizens. Anybody else? I'm looking at you. Yeah, it's rough when you're a professor and sitting there.
Organizing.
Organizing. So I had the opportunity to speak at another event that Penn Great Futures runs called Lacy the other day on the idea of civic engagement. And I asked them, what does civic engagement to mean? And we heard a lot of those things. Typically, I always considered civic engagement voting. I was like, what's civic engagement? It's voting. And based on that, I didn't want anything to do with civic engagement. I thought voting was a waste. I didn't understand its importance. I didn't see any of those types of things. But one of the things that over the last few years that's changed, and I'll talk a little bit about how my concept of what civic engagement means and its importance and how it relates to my own personal life has changed over the years. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But one of the answers stood out to me. There were two answers that I think fit my kind of understanding of what civic engagement is and informed really my understanding of what it was. One of them was putting in work on the front lines. And the other answer was love. And so when the brother said it, he actually interrupted me when I was talking to myself. So I was like, ask me questions anytime you want, and then he interrupted me. So I asked for that. But he thinks that civic engagement really is this. Hey, brother, how you doing? And have a seat. There's coffee. There's water.
Coffee?
Yeah, there's coffee right there. The revolution will not be run on decay.
The revolution will be done.
Yeah. It may be live streamed, not today. So where was I? So this idea of civic engagement as an act of love, I think, is really important, because really what civic engagement means is if you see something that you don't like, changing it. That might have to do with you personally, but it might have to do with things that are going to affect other people. When we first started Pillars of the Community, it was an organization that was set up just to work with Muslims that have been incarcerated and helping them kind of get on their feet. So we quickly realized that the issues that they were facing were also being faced in the larger community. And so then how can we address issues of racial profiling and other types of things in the larger community? But still, I didn't have any interest in voting. For me, voting was a waste of time. We're voting and electing people that aren't going to represent me, that aren't going to represent my concerns, and don't even care about me or my concerns. So why would I be at all interested in being involved in them? Plus, what am I going to say on the day of judgment if I'm involved in electing someone that ends up doing, as a moral religious person, if I end up electing someone that's going to end up creating chaos, that's going to be responsible for the murder, that's going to be responsible for incarceration and the slaughter of people in other parts of the world, right? So these were some of the ideas and thoughts that were going through my mind when I was thinking of civic engagement. What I didn't realize is, like the sister was saying, that's not what civic engagement is. Civic engagement isn't only voting, right? It's being involved and having a love for your community, seeing things that you see that you don't like, that you think should be changed, and doing something to change them. And there's different levels of civic engagement. If you're driving down the street and you see a boy with a bunch of nails sticking out of it, lying in the middle of the road, right? And you get over, instead of driving around it, you pull over to the side of the road and you take that board and you get it out of the middle of the street, you're being civically engaged. You're doing something for your community because you love your community. You don't want somebody else to come run over that board and pop their tires, right? Some people might not see that. Some people might say, they might be driving their car, they go around and they're going to keep on going. Why? Because I don't want to pull over, it's going to take my time, I'm on my way to work, I'm on my way to do this, and I'm on my way to do that. So they don't have that same love that that person who decides to pull over, right, has for the community. And so you make a choice not to be civically engaged. And so when we're working in the community and we're seeing different types of things, and you see somebody, or you personally are pulled over by the police and you're hassled by the police, and that makes you upset, one thing you can do is just be upset. You can go home. Or, that's basically what's that doing? That's swerving to avoid running over the nails. I'm going to swerve, I'm not going to do anything to change it. But if you go home and you're like, I'm going to file a complaint because I want to make sure that they know that this police officer is causing these problems so that they don't continue to cause those problems for somebody else. Then you're becoming civically engaged on the next level. But then when you're at the barber shop and when you're talking to your friends and you're speaking with people who you know and you're hearing that they're getting pulled over also, they're getting hassled, they're being issued citations, right? And you say, hey, you know what, I need to do something to stop this from happening to everybody around me. That's also civic engagement, right? And then the more you learn and the more that you see the things that you don't like, you want to start to ask yourself, what's the best way for me to address this problem? If it's a systemic problem, if it's a local problem, it's an individual problem, what do I need to do? What is my responsibility to be able to change it? So again, going back to my original views as far as voting, I wasn't like an anti-voter, right? But if I was walking along campus, this is just a few years ago as a professor, and they're like, can you sign this? Are you registered to vote? I said, no, I don't believe in the political voting system. Right now at Pillars, we have people registering to vote. And they know people are assholes. I was one of those assholes, right? I didn't think I was an asshole. I was like, I'm leaving. They ain't even ready for me. I don't believe in the political system. I'm not electing somebody. And this poor dude, they're just trying to get paid $2 for a signature or something like that. And I'm getting ready to give them my Malcolm X speech, right? But then, as I began to get involved in the larger kind of concept of civic engagement and work with other organizations, I got invited to an event that the ACLU put on in Sacramento. That was around incarceration. I think I actually went with Greg, the lobby there. We went up there and I'm like, look, they're talking about the same issues that we're talking about. They're talking about the issues that we care, but I don't see too many of us that are sitting at the table here. But it was fascinating to me that these conversations were happening in different pockets of the world, of the state. And what can we then do to work with them in order to be able to change it? At that same time, there was a proposition called Prop 47. You guys know, who remembers Prop 47? Brother Malcolm. What is Prop 47?
Prop 47, it makes certain crimes that were once felonies and turned into misdemeanors. So like,
Age on the way, so he said he wasn't giving up the rules.
He didn't want to be rude, so you're like, hey! Okay.
So like theft of a certain amount of money went from like grand larceny felonies to lower level. Stealing a firearm, when they could charge for a felony, they lowered that. Certain drug possessions, that were giving people a lot of time, they turned into felonies, so a lot of people came home early because of that deal, that proposition.
Right, so essentially what it is it took something, crimes that were wobblers, right? That the prosecution, that the district attorney can decide whether to charge that person with as a felony or as a misdemeanor. And so when you had Malcolm and Darwin walking around Southeast San Diego and they got pulled over for marijuana charges, for carrying marijuana, and then you got Todd and Hank at San Diego State who got pulled over for walking around with marijuana, right? Who do you think was charged with the felony? People of color. Darwin was gone, right? Got slapped with the felony, right? Malcolm, blam, slapped with the felony. So the proposition didn't change some of the archaic drug laws. It didn't attack the system directly as much as it could have. But what was heavy for me is that was the first time that that's actually the first time that I voted. I might have voted when I first turned 18 because my mom threatened me.
Right.
But since 18, that was the first year that I ever voted, and that was the only thing I voted for. I went through it. I just said, you know what? I'll circle this right here. Yes, I'm Prop 37. That's it. I'm done. Right? I don't want to have anything to do with it. And I still had doubts about the impact that this proposition had on the people who I cared about. Right? Predominantly black and brown people in the prisons. But then I had the opportunity to work with brother Aaron Harvey, who was locked up when Prop 47 passed. And he said when they were locked up, he said the jail was overcrowded. You had people in bunks and people sleeping on cots and people sleeping on the grounds. He said the day after, or within the first couple of days of Prop 47 being passed, the jail's empty. Because it was retroactive, right? So there's a couple of things I want us to think about, right? Because everything has, in a capitalist system, has something to do with capital. And when you don't have people in bunks and people filling up the jails, that's a loss of resources. And when people who are used to receiving money and having resources start to lose their money, they're not usually like, oh well, that was a bummer, right? Khalid Alexander talks about the cyclical nature of oppression on black people. And how as soon as we attack one issue or one system and make it a little bit better, you can't go to sleep. Because they're going to try to figure out another way to reuse that system. I just heard a report on NPR yesterday, and they were interviewing people who had been detained after crossing the border into the United States, and they were interviewing lawyers and judges and everything like that. And they started talking at the State Department now, you have all of these jails and these prisons in Texas and these places that are empty now because of some of the reform laws that have passed. And as a result, they're figuring out how can we now send this dude who crossed the border with his family to try to hire for his family, how can we send them to prisons? And hey, we can make a little extra money if we send the families with them too, right? So thinking about how money works in this system is important too. So that was the first check that I was like, oh man, you know what, I'm glad that I voted for that. I'm glad that I was in the streets, and that's when we kind of rekindled the Reclaiming the Community movement, where we were meeting and encouraging people and teaching them about Prop 47. The second thing actually happened with another brother who was facing time in a federal court. And I don't remember what the charges were, but they were linked to the 33 African American men that were locked up and rounded up under 182.5, which is a penal code that got put into place. How? From Prop 21. How did Prop 21 get passed? Either people voted for it, it got passed two ways. People voted for it, and some people didn't vote at all. And it was passed. That was in 2000? It was in 2000. Prop 21 passes, not until 2016 or 2015, I don't remember exactly was it, that Bonnie Dumanis, an elected official, the most powerful elected official, is the district attorney, decided to round up 33 African American men who were allegedly from a gang that had allegedly committed 9 shootings. Only one person was actually shot during those 9 shootings, and the person who committed the shootings was never found. And so in court, she came and she said, in court, this elected official, who was elected by us, whether through voting or not voting, said in court, we don't think they committed the crime. We don't even think they knew about the crime. But under Penal Code 182.5, which was passed by California voters, we can charge them with these shootings. And they charged them 50 years to life and set the bail at over $1 million. A few of them with the community being involved, being civically engaged because of the community, because of love for the people who were being impacted and for the people who would continue to be impacted. There was civic engagement that happened that began to challenge those laws. That 182.533 African American black men be able to challenge it. Some of them were eventually the case was dropped. But many of them had already pled. Some of them are spending up to 23 years imprisonment for this charge 182.5 that was implemented by an elected official that was using a proposition that had a penal code in it, an obscure penal code that nobody had ever used it before, right? Most people hadn't even read it, but they voted for it, right? In order to lock up 33 African American men. Okay? So back to the story of the brother that was facing time in the federal court now. In the federal court, he's standing before the judge. And this brother is named Alonzo Harvey. He had been working at Pillars and he had been doing door knocking and civic engagement work and stuff on different issues, right? His lawyer gets up and he says, look, this person, he's not a criminal. These are the charges. He served time for it. He did this and everything. This person is working in the community. He's doing positive things. He's encouraging other people in the community to go to school, to be engaged, to create a better community for themselves. What is he showing again? Love. What is he doing by showing that love in the community? Civic engagement. Goes into this whole story, blah, blah, blah. Then the DA's representative stands up. He said, yeah, this person might be doing good now. We're not going to question any of that. But that doesn't take away from the harm of the people that he targeted and that she didn't say who those people were. People that he targeted and the destruction that he's created in the Lincoln Park community area. And so please give him, I can't remember how many ridiculous amount of years it was for this. Then the judge, right? Actually, before the judge said, then the district attorney, his defense lawyer, he had the opportunity to stand up. And you know how they tell you that court isn't anything like the movie Law, like the programs Law and Order and all those other things? I think that's usually true, but I don't think this lawyer knew it, right? Because this lawyer he gave this speech, and he was saying, you know, he's done this and he's done that. And then the district attorney claims that he has destroyed the community, right? He's like facing, his back is facing us, he's talking to the judge. And he says, what community is he talking about? This community? And I was like, oh, sure, right? That is the cheesiest shit I ever heard, right? And I was like, they're sending him away, right? That person locked up. I was like, oh no. Then the judge gets up, and the judge gives a good 5 to 10 minute lecture, essentially to the prosecution, but also to everybody sitting there, saying that she would be remiss if she was to take somebody from a community that has been starved of economic funds, of programs for kids, of community development, of all of these things. And if she were to take someone that's doing good there and doing positive there, someone that loved and was civically engaged with the community, and put them in prison, then she would be the criminal. This is the judge saying that. Why does that matter in this larger conversation that I'm having about civic engagement and voting? Why does what this judge is deciding, why does that matter? How do federal judges get their positions? They're appointed. Who are they appointed by? This is why we have political education classes. Who are federal judges appointed by? The president. I'm not a big fan of Obama, okay? I'd love to have coffee with him. I'd love to have tea with him, play basketball. He seems like a really cool, good dude, okay? But it's hard for me to disassociate all of the negative things that have happened for any president who's in that position, that he was there. So I've never been a huge fan of Obama. But he's the one who appointed that judge. Presidents have the power to appoint federal judges. And I know, without a doubt, that if our president right now was the person who had appointed that federal judge, that brother wouldn't be free. That brother wouldn't be out here working on transferring to a four-year university. He wouldn't be out here working in the streets trying to encourage other people to love their community, but also to give back. So all of a sudden, I say all of that for a number of reasons. The lecture of the class today was supposed to be around black power in a white political system. And I don't think it's possible for us to talk about black power without talking about what is power. And there's a lot of people, Laila and Christina, and amazing people that are here and part of this conversation that can give you a really good definition. But what I understand is power is being able to do what you want to be able to do, when you want to be able to do it. We're not even at that level. We just want to have the power to prevent people from doing what they want to do to us whenever they want to do it. If it wasn't for the community that had stood up and started showing up at the courts and flexing their power and being civically engaged, those people whose trial was thrown out, Aaron Harvey, Brandon Duncan, DeAndre Cooper, all of these other brothers who were actually gotten out never would have gotten out. That was power, right? If people hadn't gotten together and passed Proposition 47, all of the people who had those low-level minor offenses wouldn't have gotten out. They would still be spending time today, and people would still be being incarcerated for really low-level drug and petty theft charges. That was power. But it's also important to recognize that just getting propositions passed, just getting people elected isn't enough, right? I'm not talking as a person from pillars of the community right now. I'm talking as an individual. When in our last large District 4 election, where Myrtle Cole was elected, she was supported by the community, right? The community is the one that elected her, along with others. But because we didn't have the power to hold her responsible, all we got out of it was a Walgreens, according to her. That's something that she's very proud about. If you don't believe me, you could look up her interview in the San Diego Union Tribune.
With the liquor license.
And listen with the liquor license. Well, there we go. We needed more liquor.
Yeah.
We got a Walgreens and a few sidewalks. But we also had somebody who said that the reason why black people are racially profiled in this country, in this country, as well as in her district, is because black people are the ones committing the crime. Who do you want them to pull over? White people? Right? So having somebody who has the audacity to say they represent you, be bold enough to make statements like that, shows what? A lack of power. That's a lack of power on our part. That's not her fault. That's our fault. How can we allow for someone to do something like this? Right? So this concept, and again, like I said, Pillars of the Community doesn't have to call Laila out right when I was getting ready to call Laila up. So the
I don't care. The community might just come outside of your
drive through, better than drive by.
Yeah.
It's our fault. Why? Because we haven't fully came to the understanding of how to grab power for ourselves to be able to make our own decisions and do what we want to do when we want to do them. We haven't gotten enough power to be able to act upon the things that we love, right? And we haven't done it in a strategic way. We have glimpses of it. We have glimpses of it. You have big wins that happened with the so-called Emancipation Proclamation. That wasn't a bad thing. It was a good thing. But that wasn't enough. We had other wins in the Civil Rights Movement. But it wasn't enough. Why? Because what did Michelle Alexander talk about? This shit is cyclical. As soon as you begin to say, hallelujah, we're cool, they're going to come back at you. And part of the reason is because we don't understand that this system, right, is complex. What did I say? We don't have an ideology that we talk about in these political education classes, but what do we talk about? If anything, shit is complex. And so the reason why we're here tonight is to begin to understand in the next series that's going to be going on for the next few months, every Friday, is going to be digging into the complexities of civic engagement, digging into the complexities of the electoral system, digging into the complexities of when you see something wrong that you don't like, how are you going to change it? And we're not an organization that goes out and preaches that you have to vote because people died for your right to vote. Even though that's true. People did die for your right to vote. But what we learned with Prop 47 is if you give us something to vote for, we'll vote for it. What we didn't know is you can create that stuff. You can create things to vote for. You can create candidates that you care about, and you can hold them accountable. We're not those people, these political, actually maybe some of our speakers will talk about this, but that's why, because we're understanding the complexities of civic engagement, right? But Pillars of the Community isn't an organization that says if you don't vote, you can't complain. What are you talking about? Why in the world can't you complain? Those are your elected officials. They represent you, right? If your mom does something to you that you don't like, you can complain. It might not go anywhere. You didn't vote for her, right? You didn't vote for your mom. You didn't vote for your dad. That's who they are. You are their responsibility. Our elected officials, right? We are their responsibilities. They represent us. So we're not here to say, hey, you need to play the game. We're here to say, don't get played. Understand what they're talking about. Understand what's on the ballot. Don't just vote to vote. Understand what's on it. And then vote for what you think is important. Understand who's on it. And then vote for who you think is going to represent you. But then more importantly, make sure that once they're elected, once they're in those positions, once those propositions are passed, that you don't just go right back home. You have to make sure that they implement them. Prop 47 passed, got a lot of people out of jail, got a lot of people out of prison. But you know where the majority of that money goes right now? I don't know if I want to say majority, because I don't have the numbers and somebody's going to say, hey, it goes to the district attorney. The person who did it, who fought. The person who sent a representative to Black Men United to say, don't support this bill. Don't support Prop 47. When Prop 47 was getting passed, the person that they sent to talk about Prop 47 and give information came to Black Men United. Right? I'm going to stop that part of the conversation right now. Because we love all of our brothers and everybody who's out there doing positive things and everything like that. The point is, right, is we have to hold our leadership accountable. We have to hold our elected officials accountable. We have to hold everybody accountable. Right? And that money that was supposed to go to the community now is going to district attorneys. It's going to law enforcement. Right? Now the people who get paid to lock you up are getting money to create programs, supposedly, that keep you from being incarcerated. How does that make any sense? Right? That's like giving an ice cream man money to say what?
To keep you skinny.
To keep you skinny. That ain't the ice cream man's job. They want you to be fat and happy. Right? So to talk a little bit more about some of the work that's been going on in the community around this issue, the issue of Black power and what does Black power mean for us and how we can be engaged in that. As a sister I have a ton of respect for, an amazing pillar of the community, Sister Laila Aziz.